Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Recently, I have been wondering about something. Could impatient expectation taint kindness? So, first of all, guys, I'm a bit nasally today. Excuse the additional noises in this episode and the pauses. Pretty much the idea is that I noticed something about myself, and then I thought, what if this is a universal thing, and what if this is happening to many human beings, and in some sense the species hasn't found a way to narrativize it collectively. Human beings are creatures that live behind their eyes as much as they live in front of their eyes. There's three angles to this episode to the title of this episode that needs to be covered. And so, the idea of kindness, the idea of what do I mean by as if impatient expectations taint kindness. And really, what's an impatient expectation? I would say this is the situation I've noticed. This episode is inspired out of this situation. Pretty much somebody, let's call them person A. Person A sees person B now. Person A chooses to be kind to person B. So let's say So I found a perfect example. So let's say there's person A and there's person B. Person B comes to person A and says, hey, person A, can I use your cell phone to make a call? Person A in let's say person A, there's the inner realms, outer realms. Person A is like, sure, man, you can use my phone to make a call. And person A, in allowing, person A says yes and feels they are doing an act of kindness. Now, person B, which in some sense person A is feeling like they feel they're being kind to, person B, let's say, uses person A's phone longer than expected and longer than it's polite. Sorry guys, I'm sitting cross-legged. I'm trying to balance myself here. Anyways, to continue, the idea is very simple. Pretty much I'm saying that we have could impatient expectations taint kindness? And then I guess something I should have done, kindness, doing something for others, taint is in some sense ruining something you're doing. Pretty much, some dude, person B, asks person A to use their phone. Person A says okay, person B uses it longer than person A expects, and the impatience of person A and their expectation for what person B should do in some sense taints their kind intent from the beginning. That means, believe it or not, the kindness we find in the world, it's a type of artificial kindness that the moment it's not reciprocated, it turns into, I would say, the opposite, cruelty. That means the measure of artificial kindness is, I guess, how impatience changes it. What is an act of kindness? I would say an equation for kindness would be how others are either equal or greater than self. When we look up the definition of kindness, it says the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. Here it says kindness is a type of behavior marked by acts of generosity, consideration, rendering assistance or concern for others without expecting praise or reward in return. Technically, kindness is a selfless act, but I would say in these modern times, especially with Civilization 1.0, I would say that there's a conditional kindness and there's an unconditional kindness. The conditional kindness is dependent on self-expectation and other expectation. Unconditional kindness is selfless. And to be unconditionally kind is another way of saying to be free from humanized desire. I would say it's as if pretty much the two types of kindness could be seen as kindness with expectation Okay. Sorry for the interruption, guys. Anyways. There's two types of kindness. There's kindness without expectation. There is kindness with expectation. When you are a shaped creature in a world where survival is necessary, I would say kindness comes with expectation, you know. It's just natural that anything a person puts effort in, they expect some sort of return. However, to be attached to the return, or how the return should be, is where the issue comes, you know. Kindness is really the trait of a powerful being. When I think about it, you know, the kindest beings I've seen have been the most able, most powerful, most conscious. I would say kindness is a sign that the human being has noticed something more than, you know, the desire of, you know, collective imbalance. I feel that kindness for the human experience can be divided in three ways. There's a kindness towards self, a kindness towards, I should write it this way. There's a kindness towards and from self. There is a kindness towards others. There is a kindness towards the world. The kindness towards self and from self is pretty much, it has two sides. It's kind of like, here, I'll put it, there's self to self, there's self to others, and there is self to world. So I feel that specifically for the human organism, I think deep down everybody is strangely yearning for these kinds of kindnesses towards life, right? It's as if a human being, or let's consider an advanced civilization, for example. In an advanced civilization, a human being will be kind to not just themselves, you know, they not just to others, but themselves, right? So it's as if it's like kindness on the level of individualism, on the personal dimension. So this is kind of like personal kindness, impersonal, I would say semi-personal, semi-impersonal. Impersonal means it's beyond the dimensions of personality. there's the kindness of the, let's say, dimensions of self. So there's the kindness here, types of kindness, 9 types. So I guess, guys, I'm trying to explain how it's fathomable to see that there's 9 types of kindness. There's the kindness of a self with its own self. There's the kindness of a self with others. There's the kindness of a self with the world. Then there's the kindness of others with the self. Then there's a kindness of others with others. And then there's a kindness of others with the world. Then there's the kindness of the world to the self. For example, the archetype of those blessed by the divine would be something of this sort. The kindness of the world to others, and the kindness of the world with the world. So, what I'm trying to say here in the notes is that human consciousness can be considered the interaction of 3 dimensions. Pretty much I consider every human being, the way that their being is a human being is the consideration of these dimensions. We say that there was a world, then a self emerged, and then the sense of self multiplied, and then others emerged. honestly, sorry for the interruptions, guys. There's too many this episode. But anyways, I guess this episode, seriously, like what I'm looking at is human nature, human behavior, and in some sense the reason behind the actions that human beings do. The idea is simply that there's three angles where the vision of kindness can apply. Human beings are a creature that has a sort of inner and outer realm. Oh man. I don't know what's going on with how I feel, guys. The spirit of speech seems to be more on the sidelines in this episode. I would say that in every conscious waking state to the human being, there is pretty much anywhere where the human being is, there is pretty much cause and effect occurring on an inner level and an outer level. When a person does something with expectation, they're actually doing something for their inner realms. You can say that let's say a kind person, let's say somebody does something so kind, and then people realize he actually did it selfishly. Imagine somebody does something for a selfish motive, and it ends up becoming a kindness for everybody. For example, an inventor. Oftentimes inventors arise because there are human beings that want to show themselves that they can recreate the conditions behind their eyes in front of their eyes. That's really the motivation of creativity. Creativity comes to those who are capable of watching their own mind. Anybody who's capable of watching their mind, you will be fascinated that creativity is not something somebody has. Creativity is a relationship with the whole moment. And the moment divides into how our mind is moving our body, how our inner realms are giving purpose to the outer realms, giving meaning to the outer realms, and how the body is moving the mind, right? When it comes to kindness in the outer life, I would say the resolution is simply this. All humans for now are mortal. All humans deserve infinite compassion. If you tell somebody be compassionate, the person's like, why, man? It's like, why do I need to be anything in the moment? But when you see that the existential circumstances, dare I say, have a sort of cruelty to them, it's as if I remember the earthquake in 2016, I believe, in Japan, that took place. I remember I was watching that video and I felt as if the natural world was being cruel, and then I thought about it and I realized that that's the nature of human consciousness. Human consciousness is an additional level of a consideration of variables of information that other species, other forces in nature do not have. A person can like a tree, let's say we have a tree growing in the sun and we have a human being growing, and sure, they're both natural, they're both parts of nature that are growing, but on some level the dimensions that the human being receives, it's far superior. You know what it is? It's as if human consciousness, we are the knights of the animal realm, and we have been knighted by an invisible field of activity. In the outer life, honestly, this has been my realization. This has been a reason why I would say I have abandoned ship of anger and, indecency. I feel every human being, because they have a unique circumstances, because their DNA is different, because their karma is different, every human being is actually engaging some great force, some great internal force. For example, for me, I remember when I was a kid, when I would do things that some part of me knew that I shouldn't do, for example, like cruelty or anger, or in some sense, like being rude unintentionally, you know, or not unintentionally, intentionally being rude. It's as if some part of the being feels like, okay, they are walking astray from the decency resonance of the moment. Now, what I have realized is that human beings are so preoccupied by their inner life that they become desensitized to their outer life. It's another way of saying, like, let's say there's somebody, an egotistical person, okay? Or let's say an egotistical situation where, you know, imagine there's a person who, I don't know, imagine, like, you know, let's say there's the richest person in the land, and this richest person in the land just takes from the people and doesn't give anything back. Do you know? It's as if usually how dictators arise is when the individual is more convinced by the universe behind their eyes than in front of their eyes. You know, it's like, it's an inner possession. I would say violence, cruelty, it is how an inner realm circumstance has possessed the behavior, as in some sense it's like a sort of ideological possession. Ever since human beings have become conscious, any sort of reason for violence has been in some sense pushed aside. I am telling you, the moment the human being realized there's something going on beyond just, you know, an object's destiny, there's something here that is a force, an intelligent force that has access to superior levels. You know, sure, we can consider the human being an animal, but it's an animal that has lifted its head out of the water, if in some sense all the other species, their heads are underwater. You know, in the outer life, pretty much the three types of compassion needed, or the three dimensions of compassion needed, is that the person, this second, here I'll tell you, the easiest thing is to learn how to be compassionate to others. Then I would say the harder thing is to learn to be compassionate to yourself. And then once the person realizes that their beliefs come from others and their inner knowing comes from themselves, it's as if compassion to the self and compassion to others inevitably leads to compassion to the world. It's as if the person's like, why am I helping others if I can help the world, right? It's like there's a there's a different allure to that purpose, right? It's as if like a person can come up with a strategy that makes like a group of people victorious, or a person can in some sense come up with a strategy that makes the world victorious. The victory of the world is greater than, in some sense, the victory of the self and the victory of others, and the victory of others is greater than the victory of the self, and the victory of the self, I would say hilariously, is it's as if there are three corners to a room, or it's like a room with three doors. Each door has a significance. If I was to give you an example of kindness to the self, it would be as if a human being releasing their identity from their memories. That would be a kindness to self. That means, let's say you've done something in the past that has imprinted a sort of, let's say, inefficiency on your nature. The idea is this is something I've done, you know, just automatically, but I'll share it to people. There has been times where anytime I feel I have moved into, let's say, an indecency resonance, right? That means that I have strayed away from that feeling within me of as if I ignored the balance of the realm. I apologize to my moment. You know, I would say I'm a human being who has actually talked to the moment more than to what is in the moment. And when I give these talks, you know, I feel as if I am you know, on the great stage of manifestation. A guest of inconceivable skies. Dear listeners, in our outer life, we have to realize that everybody, as I believe it was Aristotle or Plato, one of these guys, and he said everybody is fighting a battle you cannot see. And so technically it means every human being, regardless of what their outer life is, how their inner life has journeyed, suggests their capability, ability, and health, you know. It's kind of strange. It's like as a biological entity needs to have desires in order to survive, but in some sense, as I would say, a non-biological, non-physiological, as a psychological entity, you know, desire leads to suffering. Why? Because desire is a snapshot expectation of a changing world. One of the hardest things, I would say, hardest ideas for the human species to come to terms with, that how are we believing in a changing world, as if the only truth of a changing world is change, you know. It's as if change is the changeless thing. It's as if somebody was like Mr. Within. Do we have any sort of immortal archetypes existing in 2022? I would say time. Time is an immortal. It's an immortal idea. You know, in Buddhism, I would say in Tibetan Buddhism, there are practices that suddenly make the human being sensitive to how intense actually life is. Based on that intensity, compassion becomes the answer. And you know, it should be a compassion without expectation. I think this is really a sort of mind state automata. In my inner life, when I realize that nobody can see how I am seeing myself, pretty much I would say a lot of egotistical desires just stopped making sense. In my outer life, I would say, as a human being, I have been incapable of getting rid of all my desires. But I would say that even though I have noticed my mind quietening, it's as if in front of your eyes you need kindness towards a mortal creature lost in the void. We need to be kind to a species lost in a void, and we need to be kind to a world that cannot know itself conceptually. Behind our eyes, the kindness of the inner life is to, I would say, accept the simple. I don't know how a person can be kind if they have a hierarchical system of what they should do. You know, this is the challenge, right, of human psychology. You know, let's say right now in 2022, we're living at a time, and especially in developed countries, there seems to be this sort of, I guess, postmodernistic movement going on, where the identity of the individual is not just being defined in accordance to the biological traits of the individual, but in accordance to the free will of the individual. And I would say the purpose, or I shouldn't say purpose, the role of free will is in some sense to actualize reality. You know, it's as if it's strange. What we call free will is how behind our minds we're seeing probabilities and options and like multiple views to a moment. But in front of our eyes, the action has to be either one of the probabilities. You see, the mind is behaving like a multidimensional being. The body is behaving like one side of the coin of duality. So I guess in the outer life, we require, let's say it's somebody says Mr. Within, there's no way I can be kind selflessly, right? That means human beings need to have a sense of self to function in civilization. And so it's as if to ask people to be selflessly kind is another way of saying to people, don't be a mind in the world, right? Don't be a character in a story. But I feel that there's a way to bypass it, that even you can say the most chaotic egos can be tamed. You know, that means the cruelest dictators on the planet, on this planet, can change. Do you know? But their change must come from within. That is the most profoundest type of change. You know, there's some things in life a person can change their physical environment, you know, but they will see that it's as if certain modes of perception are actually held from behind one's eyes. That means they're starting from the inner realms, and because they're starting from the inner realms, unless the person actually reestablishes a conscious relationship with their mind, they will be unconsciously dragged around by it. In the outer life, we need compassion, I would say, to others and the world. That is the role of being in a multiplayer elemental server, just like a multiplayer online video game. Instead of so multiplayer online video games, they have one map, right? And they have one world map, and all the players are like logging into their accounts, right? And so if you look at the human experience, what's happening is that there is one elemental, rather than, instead of a video game, the world is made of pixels. Instead, it's as if this world is made of the periodic table, you know, and this common server that we're all in, when a human being is born or when a human being awakens, it's as if they're either logging in or they're joining the game for the first time. Okay. Let me see what I can say now. So pretty much, guys, I mean, I'm explaining the geometry behind my vision. I see a human being. I see this human being's intelligence divided between the inner and the outer. When it comes to the inner life, there's unknown variables, and then there's known variables. And I would say when it comes to the outer life, again, also there's unknown variables and known variables. Right now, I would say the situation that the human being is in. Inner means self first, then world. And outer means world first, then self. I have declared that in the future, pretty much, there's going to be two schools of thought which are going to be very superior. And pretty much everybody on the planet will either be an unknownist, or a knowist. You know, this is probably a word people don't use, but unknown ability and known ability. Pretty much it's mind, body. Kindness for the body, for the self would be health. For example, me smoking cigarettes, it's like me being unkind to myself. But me, for example, giving these talks, right, is like me being kind to myself. Really, the human position is unknown. It's designed for us to recognize the unknown. I would say the conscious purpose of human life is to recognize the unknown and to meet the unknown, and in some sense to realize that we are also being the unknown. You know, you start off in life. I have a twin brother. Last night we were talking, and I was telling him that all my conclusions on metaphysics has come to this point that the unknown is unknown. That means I would say Mr.Within's ultimate metaphysical realization. You see, pretty much the circular situations are this. Okay, we have unknown, we have known self. This is one of the most important things I can write for. We have a known self, we have an unknown self. We have a known self, we have a known world. We have a known self, we have an unknown world. We have an unknown self. In a known world. And we have an unknown self in an unknown world. So this is why is this important? Why am I sharing this? Because, dear listeners, I feel that the psychology of all human beings on this planet can be quadrantzed. Pretty much there's 4 quadrants, there's 4 seasons to psychological positions of, let's say, conscious intelligence. So known self, known world, I would say this is a hilariously, another way of saying, here, we can call it the observable universe. Okay, here, I would say Mr. Within's ultimate metaphysical realization. I feel I've experienced these 3 states. These 4 states, and the final one was the unknown self and the unknown world. And I would say this year, I clarified it for myself. Imagine being a human being, conditioned in a world where after 4.5 billion years of evolution, there's a biological entity. There's there's the capability of of the DNA, and then there's language acquisition, and then there's the development of history and the information age. Right? So it's as if as one of those human beings born in 1991. I would say it's as if I feel like I was one of the early generations that experienced the development of the information age. That means I remember those dial-up, I mean, this might be impossible for the modern human beings to for, let's say, the younger generations to understand, but there was a time before the internet. And strangely, the world was yearning for it. When I look at the known self in an unknown world, this is pretty much, the human being. When I look at a known self, known world, this is a human being inside their belief. That means a known world means a finite realm. It's another way of saying it's a closed system. So I would say this is like a closed system here. Open system. And then the unknown self in the known world, I would say that's an open system too. And the unknown self in the unknown world, it is, an open system, because we don't know what other dimension of reality's meaning hides in the void, Pretty much the effort of a conscious species to understand the cosmos, it's literally like we are mining the void. We are trying to extract diamonds of meaning from the dirt of emptiness. The unknown self and the unknown world, that's pretty much like you as an intelligent being realizing what is from an original position moving the human intelligence, and what is moving the world, they cannot be separate. You see, in yoga, there's a man by the name of Swami Krishnananda. He says meditation stops once you realize the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity. Now, if you look at the individual activity and the cosmic activity, if you look at it from a known self in a known world, you see they're different. The known self is like the microcosm, the known world is the macrocosm. They're happening at the same time, but there's a there's an appearance difference, you know. But if you realize that what your known world and known self have in common is actually how the unknownness, the unknown quality of the self and the unknown quality of the world are inseparable. So what I'm trying to say is objects and subjects, they can be separated from the world. What cannot be separated is how the mind is behaving like the whole space where reality is being experienced. You see, human consciousness, it has reached a point where it is wondering, okay, beyond an object, what do we do? And beyond the subject, what do we do? You know, beyond our objective life, it was our subjective life. Right now, you could totally see the species. It's like, it's not that we biologically have stopped evolving, you know, properly or naturally. It's kind of like, you know, it's like the species, it's like this creature that we're being. At some point it was four-limbed. That means it couldn't in some sense separate the functions of its limbs. So it's as if, imagine the earliest beings, they just had like a binary system on off. You can think of it this way. It's as if when a creature back in the day put an effort to move, all four of its limbs would move, you know. Now, like as if running was done four-limbed. Right now, imagine a creature that suddenly stopped, like as if the lower body could do a different behavior and the upper body could do a different behavior. Right now, when you look at the human beings, we are juggling so many different behaviors that when you honestly look at lesser animals, you're like, man, you know, it's like, are other species slow, or in some sense was the human species gifted? You know, that means in some cultures I wouldn't be surprised if consciousness was the gift of the gods, you know. And when I say gift of the gods, I mean the potentials of the realm. Life is in some sense, for the microcosmic identity, impossible to comprehend. For the macrocosmic identity, there is no self to comprehend. And it is only from the position of an unknown self, that moment, whoever you are listening to me, you realize that regardless of the promises of ideological systems on about what you are, it's unknown. And this was I would say, one of the most strangest things I had to accept in life. You know, it's as if you hear people say, I'm a body, man, you know, and you hear people say, I'm a mind, and then you hear some people say, I'm a soul, and they say, my body did this, my body did that, my mind did this, my mind did that, my soul did this, my soul, like, was this, was that, right? But in some sense, who has the audacity, who has the ability on this planet as a creature in this massive landscape to be like, okay, let us consider that the starting point is unknown. You see, too, this is another way where I could say kindness can be globalized, because we don't know what we're being cruel to, you know? Every time in my life where I have allowed a destructive intent to step out from my inner realms in the outer realms, I have simultaneously destroyed myself. This is the thing, it's kind of like violence, like you can't punch someone without hurting yourself, you know. Similarly to how there is a stress in regards, an equivalent stress in regards to the force exerted. Let's say somebody punches a wall, you know, and it's like the same force comes back. And let's say they break their hand or something. So similarly, it's another way of saying, now, what if the mind punched the wall? right? For me, this is the strangeness of life, right? The free will is like the pilot, but the plane of existence was not made by the pilot. It's as if the body is a gift from the earth, and the mind is a mysterious gift that some cultures attribute to the sky. As if the simultaneity of Purusha and Prakriti, of consciousness and matter, is in some sense how the human species is the child of Mother Earth and Father Sky. Those are, I would say, existential and experiential parents of every person, right? It's another way of saying your mind comes from a field, a boundless field of activity, and your body comes as a particle in a certain phase of, I would say, not just the evolution of creatures on Earth, but we are the evolution of Earth. We are the winds of evolution that guide the sails of the species forward in the world. You see, it's like, in this book I'm writing called Civilization 2.0, I share a story at the beginning. And it's a story I designed in the sense that I was just fathoming, in some sense, like imagine there's this giant boat. Okay, this giant boat where it has 8 billion people on the boat. Okay, and let's say there's multiple captains to the ship. Now imagine that 8 billion people on a boat, and this boat is so long, it's like such a long vertical boat that one end of the people on one end of the boat cannot see the people on the other end. Now imagine in one end of this boat, this giant boat, this giant ship, there is in some sense holes, like there's holes and the ship is sinking, and it's as if people at the bottom of people at the back of the boat, they notice that it's sinking, and people at the front don't even know it's sinking. That means the way the psychology of the human being has classified itself in Civilization 1.0 is that as a reaction to as an unconscious reaction to how overwhelming it is to consider ourselves as unknown beings, man in some sense plays games of knowledge. And it's another way of saying, it's like, why should an intelligence have this ability to receive and express? And the answer is cosmological. What that means is, honestly, all of human psychology, even language, right, is based, this is going to sound bizarre to people, but I feel this is accurate. All human psychology, creature behavior, all human stories and contexts, it's all the on and off switch effect of the sun. So pretty much, let me tell you how evolution sculpted the animal. It was literally light, absence of light, absence of light, absence of light. Even if you look at our breathing, like look at our biological body, whoever you are listening to me, it's the same behavior. The binariness of life comes from the cosmological, I would say the astronomical position of human beings, right? And you even look at it, for example, in religious texts. The angels have a connotation of light, and in some sense the devils have a connotation of darkness. The psychology of the species is unconsciously and indirectly, or in a hidden way, directly influenced by the absence of light and its presence. Pretty much, it's hilarious how much of life is binary. When I say binary, I mean in the sense of computer code. and I look at myself right now and I ask myself what problems I have in life, and they're all dualistic. That means the moment you're a self, you're burdened with all the relationships that self can have with the world. But if you learn to be the world in the world, right, this is where I would say it's the true glow of mysticism. Where it's as if you as a being are like, okay, world, you've set me up as this physical self, as an objective self and a subjective self, and you've given me a time limit, and you've also given me, let's say, the ability to fathom the future. The future was one of the greatest discoveries that I would say revolutionized the psychology of what we are. Time was like huge. That means it's as if, like, aside from time being the brain's extraction of meaning from how matter changes in space, the inner realms are moving faster than the outer realms. It's another way of saying the mind is moving faster than the body, and this is why we feel we have free will. One thing that the human being knows is that a quality of experience is perception, and a quality of perception is how, in some sense, it is becoming a memory, and the moment it does, how it is influenced by the rest. They say that if somebody wants to remember something, pretty much in I guess, a view, a psychological view. There is the short-term memory and there's the long-term memory. And, there were these people who would memorize like a deck of cards, and then people would ask them like, hey man, how do you memorize a deck of cards? By just seeing it once. And the person would say this idea of a memory palace. And the idea of a memory palace would be pretty much the guy goes to a city where every day he's been walking the same path, and when he starts trying to remember the cards, the more abstract the imagery, the more memorable it is. And it's another way of saying abstraction infused with the consciousness of a journeyer, in some sense becomes an imprint in long-term memory. What I'm trying to say is that we are an unknown journeyer in an unknown world, honestly. Right now, because there's the body, we become a sort of known self, in an unknown world. And because we have the sense of mind, the mind is like an unknown self, and the unknown self is in the known world. And so in some sense, it's like when a person wonders, who is it that is knowing? It's as if it's like another way of saying what is behind your eyes is more unknown than what is in front of your eyes. Right now, people are not even considering the possibility that this whole time on this planet, we have been saying imagination is not real, we have been saying dreams are not real, and we have not realized that really it's not that we go to sleep and then we have dreams or we enter a dream state. There is a dimension, there is a way I would say the human intelligence is happening where the dream state never goes anywhere. This is why imagination is able. Imagination is another way of saying in the background of your mind, the permissions of a dream still exist. The permissions of a dream state. The species has feared itself. The species has feared its own greatness. This is the folly of, mankind in modern times. Pretty much like, what can a creature do? What can a creature in a world possibly do? What can human beings do? We can move as objects. We can create and destroy subjects. mean, technically we can create and destroy objects. I mean, women can create objects. I would say, like, biologically. But anyways, I'll say this. We have the dimension of the body, and the body is like an Iron Man suit with its own access. So imagine if Tony Stark wore 3 Iron Man suits overlaid, right? As if there was an Iron Man suit inside an Iron Man suit inside an Iron Man suit, and then Tony Stark was chilling, you know? If you take the idea that Tony Stark is the true nature, the Atman, the soul, as if imagine Batman and Superman had decided to stop punching people and had gone to, like, let's say the Dalai Lama, and were sitting peacefully in a forest. Or not the Dalai Lama, let's say a yogi, right? Imagine Batman and Superman just sitting like Buddha, like positioned like Buddha, meditating in the forest. And so the yogi says, you know, greater than Batman, greater than Superman, there's the ultimate superhero. The ultimate superhero is the Atman, right? And the Atman is another way of saying that somehow in the ingenious designs of nature, there has been a possibility in human psychology for there to be a conscious access point. It's another way of saying the known self may not be capable of understanding the known world, but it is capable of understanding the unknown self. Why? Because the unknown self is usually the opposite. You know, this is something where I don't know how many people use this approach to perception, but it's as if in anything you do, just to be safe, you wonder about the opposite. You know, let's say there's a glass of orange juice, and let's say you're a kid and you just see this glass of orange juice, and imagine you're like, I'm thirsty, I'm going to drink it, right? It's as if there's that side of the coin, and imagine the other side of the coin, whose glass of orange juice is this? Our bodies are batteries, technically, you know, and so it's as if, where should this battery life go to? That means it's like energy that's around for a little while, that's wondering, like, what in this world, in this changing world, should I touch and should I not touch? You know, for example, somebody who has great honor, right? Like, who has a very advanced level of honor. You know, it's as if that person, that honor, it's like their honor system surpasses their emotional, let's say, endless self-simulation, right? Because the way life is happening, we speak about it as if it's a character in a story, and it's the same you every day. You know, like a person goes to sleep, wakes up, and it's just like them that had slept. But in reality, the brain is behaving anew. The brain is like a master performer, like the human body, right? The heart, the lungs, all of these. It's as if, like, for me, just the ability to be a biological creature, it's like this symphony of ingenious designs. Right? It's as if, like, the body is filled with, like, the architecture of another world, or I would say with the blue. It's as if it's like an engineer looked at the human biological body and wondered, who could invent such a masterpiece? The biological body is like honestly the coolest thing, right? And the body has so many dimensions considered. Like, just take this in, guys, that in the genetical program of the human being, we are born with eyes and nose, ears and a mouth, right? And limbs. Like, it's as if we are already inside an Iron Man suit built for a specific purpose, you know? For me, pretty much a major inspiration for these talks that I give is that I have, aside from, proposing this challenge for myself to see is it possible, for who I am to give 10,000 talks in this lifetime. And then at the same time, there is, I would say, the sub-motive and the sub-challenge to see like every day of my life I am wondering about the response. Like, it's as if I am seeking a colossal question. Right? And the ultimate question I'm seeking is, what is the most, like, if the world right now, Civilization 1.0 was a chess game, it's as if what would be the chess moves that Civilization 1.0 could make that in the most quickest, efficient way it advances. You see, advancement is more like not somebody comes and tells you advance that way and everybody advances that way. Advancement is like the might of one's own birthright, right? It's as if we say it's the birthright of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the birthright of every human being. Now, at the same time, the infinite potential of the ability of the human species is the birthright of every human being. Guys, I'm going to put the notepad away. I just feel like giving the microphone to my heart for a moment. I was thinking that when I'm in this episode in which I am speaking about kindness, to what degree should I share, right? I was thinking about that. And when I think about my past, of course, there is a sort of bias of my own personality in the moment, right? But when I think about the future, that is like, the future is strangely, this might be an odd thing to say, but somehow to know that the future will be something else other than this is really, I would say, the beauty of the future. I am telling you guys, our species is being educated only based on past certainties, rather than the species getting an ability to, in some sense, march into the unknown. It's as if the future can reanimate one's character. I am telling you, it's as if, like, imagine somebody's doing something wrong and a time traveler came back and showed them, like, yo, if you do this, this shit's gonna happen, be careful, right? And the moment the person saw how their action was affecting the future, it's as if the ego, believe it or not, cracks. A metaphor even given to the ego is an egg. I've heard certain yogis talk about this, where they say, like, the ego is like an egg, and if the egg breaks from the outside, there is no life. But if the egg breaks from the inside, there is life. If the egg is being a marker for the ego, let's take, for example, like a cruel dictator. A cruel dictator is like an egg. Now, if the egg doesn't realize that there's another way the whole life energies of the individual can animate, it's as if we think we are bound to subjects. But subjects are our subjects. You see, it's like the mind is the servant, right? This doesn't mean like a person has to be vicious to their own mind. Be like, mind, I command you, solve my problems. And it's like, what, what I'm trying to say is that I have noticed when a human being allows themselves, allows their self, allows their eyes from the simplest moment they can find to look at the world again, it's as if there is freedom. Who knew freedom is like just shifting your head by a tiny angle and seeing a new dimension? I have memories of myself where I wasn't a kind person, you know. And believe it or not, I wouldn't even be surprised if in the future people think I'm a bit cruel, right? Because a lot of my value system is based on what I feel is possible in the future rather than what I feel the past sees and what the present claims. Right? The future has a power that those who are just conditioned in the present and past don't have. That means it's like when you look at mystical traditions, those who would take people to the here and now, it's like, great, you're in the here and now what? It's as if like, man, I wanted to get enlightened, but after I became enlightened, there was no point of wanting to become enlightened. So it would be as if, what would a post-enlightened, post-liberated, you know, movement of the species be like, you know? A part of me feels that right now, behind my eyes, I am actually in the future. Because I can see, like, how something will happen. That means I am inside an inner probability of how I am envisioning the future. Right? Moments where I have been, I would say, let's say, unkind and cruel, I would say in those moments, I have ignored what was in front of me. I was too convinced by my own past. Anytime I've gotten angry, I've just noticed. Just anger is the result of like a sudden shift in identity. You know, it's like even a sort of tone of voice can make a person angry. Why? Because the tone can suggest how they're being treated, you know? This species of ours needs an incredible patience. Do you know what that means? That means we should not just be patient enough to stop caring about, you know, all the isms in society, right? It's as if, like, to me, I found it so bizarre, right, that human beings have had the concept of racism, where they've discriminated against each other's color of skin, but nobody cared about color of eyes. Nobody cared about, you know, color of hair. Do you know? Like, it was only just the color of skin people cared, you know? And to me, that's so bizarre. Do you know? It to me, it's as if, like, it's one of those situations where its color cannot be judged. It's a universal, you know? And so, in the future, there will be a ridiculous patience where we wouldn't care about color. Like, as if, like, you know, what color the moment is. It's like the world is filled with all the colors, do you know? You know, it's as if, like, you know, one light beam fragments and people discriminate. Like, it doesn't, you know. But to me, what I'm seeing in the future, we are right now, let's say it's human beings discriminating against human beings. In the future, an advanced civilization will not tolerate the discrimination of human beings to human beings, the discrimination of human beings to lesser beings like other animal species. The future will be so smart that it will find a way to feed the species without, in some sense, devouring animal life, you know. You know, I want in an advanced civilization, all other life forms other than let's say all sorts of life forms and all behaviors in the world, they are the advanced communication of the universal sector, right? When I say advanced communicator, it's not just someone who feels like they've put on a top hat and a tuxedo and they're like, I'm an advanced communicator, you know. Do you know, it's like when I say an advanced communicator, it's as if how capable and patient is the human attention to for a moment see that there is not people outside. There is our mind happening first, then there's all the associations that become stickers on what our attention puts on. You see, an advanced civilization will not discriminate against animals. Lesser animals, human beings will not be discriminated against. In some sense, collective minds will not be discriminated against. Robots, androids, cyborgs will not be discriminated against. Clones will not be discriminated against. Let's say aliens, like diplomatic relationships with aliens. Imagine in the future, like when you get a passport, it also underneath it, it says like which galaxy, which planet also, you know. Can you imagine somebody working at like an airport like thousands of years in the future and like, you know, an alien is coming, right? You know, and the person's like, sir, I need to see your alien immigration documentation, you know? And the alien just makes some like next level alien noise and the person says, okay, I understand, so can we kill What I'm trying to say is that because we fear the unknown, we allow ourselves to be identified based on the past, and where attention is pretty much where life builds around. If a person's attention is on their own inefficiencies, then you're gonna like have more complex views on how things are inefficient. But if a person tries this is honestly the algorithm I have found. This is if somebody said, Mr.Within, have you found any diamonds in the dirt? I'd be like, this is the one. Where I just wondered, why not the advanced? In any situation in life, the mind gives the individual an ability to wonder, just to wonder. It doesn't mean a person has to do the most advanced thing all the time, but it means that at least the mind has the capability to wonder what it would have been like, right? It's as if like a person's in a conversation, then they leave the conversation, and then like a couple minutes after, they're like, oh my God, I should have said this, I should have said that, I could have said this, I could have said that, you know? And before an advanced civilization can properly happen, the educational role has a huge, the educational system has a huge role, in the great transformation of species into a conscious species. Right now, civilization, you can say it's kind of like a machine-like, right? It's kind of like people don't care for the world, and the world, people don't care for civilization on some mortal level, right? And on some level, the civilization doesn't care for them. This is civilization 1.0. It is a civilization disconnected. Just like Sun Tzu would say in The Art of War, when two generals and their armies are fighting, the general that manages to make the other general not be capable to communicating with his army wins. Similarly, civilization 1.0 is how the future potential, the general of the human species, is in some sense disconnected with I would say, the army of creaturehood. So an advanced civilization is when, in George Orwell wrote 1984, and imagine somebody writes a book called 4984. And instead of the concept of, I would say, of a big brother, a sort of dystopian surveillance nightmare, there's the concept of the advanced civilization being the older brother. that means a guardian of it, of the lesser dimension. This is usually why, the oldest kids in families become great parents, when they have younger siblings. In the chat section, somebody says, so difficult to imagine a world where people are genuine. I would say that it's not difficult to imagine. You know why? Because it's all about a common agreement point. That means if we can answer the question, what do 8 billion inner realms, which they're each different in accordance to their DNA, have in common? And you will see, when you look at people's past, they don't have a lot in common. When you look at people in the present, everybody's doing their own thing. They don't have, let's say, much in common. It is only the future where we can have something in common. The future is the common denominator of, I would say, all past and present simulations of reality. The future is how the world reveals itself. Like, that's the most incredible thing about the future. I realized I've been talking about an advanced civilization so much in these talks that I realized that, like, I'm a futurist. That means to me it's as if the past is past. Like, what are you going to do about it? The present is kind of like, it's free will piloting wherever it chooses. And the future is the suggestion that the past, it's as if somebody says, if my past doesn't define me, what defines me? And you could act like this oneness in the here and now, but it's like that technically, like, that there's an ignorance there, right? There's I posted this picture on Facebook, guys. Let me find it. It's hilarious. I'm gonna put it in the chat section there. Okay, so this is a ridiculous, like, meme, but it kind of proves the point I'm trying to make of the unknown being unknown. That's the truth. That's true spirituality. The unknown is not a story. Stories are in the known boundary, in the known dimension. So in this meme, it says, "Tell me the truth. I'm ready to hear it. Attachment to spiritual identity is ego too." It's not that it's wrong being an ego. It's that if Tony Stark lives in the Iron Man suit, it's as if, like, it becomes a bit weird. I have wondered that what if the human species increased its patience, which is another way of saying the human species begins to consider the value to moments of manifestation, right, from multiple angles. Okay, that means, imagine you see someone, you think they're a good person, or you think they're a bad person. This is pretty dualistic, only two-dimension based view, right? But imagine if there were multiple dimensions. Like, if you thought somebody was a good person, you'd be like, how are they being a good person? Or in some sense, somebody was a bad person, like, how are they being a bad person, right? And what kind of, let's say, level of evil are we seeing, and what kind of level of good are we seeing? Like, in the future, hilariously, like, imagine somebody does an evil act, and, like, it's like that evil act will be known as, like, oh my god, this person committed, like, at level, let's say, 7,342 kind of evil, it's like that level of evil, for example. right? What I'm trying to say is that the mind is free to take the senses, reanimate itself, then realign its reanimated self, which is the relationship of its memory with the free will with the future of the free will. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the more dimensions we can see logically, the more patient the person has to be to see what information those dimensions have, right? It's something that I think many people would agree on, is that emotions lead to instantaneous action, right? But analysis is kind of like fighting the impulses of the emotion, right? Let's say you're, how would I say it? First of all, I mean, obviously, guys, the species in the honor, of an advanced civilization and the future generations, the species doesn't have time to be cruel. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Because if the person considers that the greatest victory is the victory of everybody, technically, it's as if human beings don't just want to be enlightened in an unenlightened world. Like, what is that? People don't want to be successful in an unsuccessful world. They want to be successful in a successful world. And imagine every person dedicated a small portion of their lifetime to just, in some sense, help carry the banner of the human species. Like, that's all that we're doing, right? It's like the romanticism of individual consciousness with a collective space, inevitably realizing that which it is living for, it is being. Guys, I'll share something. This happened a long time ago, but it was an emotional moment, okay? I was in the UK. This is in 2010, 11. And I remember I was a completely different person than how you see my attention organized now. But I remember I had one of these, I had a bad night, where one of those dark nights of the soul, where I don't know how to tell you, but pretty much like I couldn't see someone I was with, and so I was in just a sort of self-loathing mindset, and then I drank alcohol, and then that self-loathing amplified. And then I remember it was like, I go back to my the place I was staying at, and I go into they had like this bath, like they had this bathtub, right? And I remember I was so intoxicated that for a second I just went and lied in the bathtub, right? In case if I, was gonna puke or something, But anyways, what I'm saying is that it was such a dark night of the soul that for a second I just felt like self-failure. I don't know if that's a term we can say, but I felt like not worthless. I felt I felt like the world was a mistake. Like the experience of the world was a mistake in that moment. And I only have a twin brother, he's the same age as me. But in that moment, in 2010, for a second, I had a metaphysical inner experience, and I felt, and how would I explain to you, a sort of transcendental older brother archetype watching me. Right, so imagine you're a twin your whole life, and suddenly in your inner realms you have this older brother archetype, right? And I remember in that moment when I just noticed the presence of that archetype, and it was as if like a greater self staring at like its lesser self, as if being like, remember yourself. And
I will tell you, the moment in my inner realms, my mind acknowledged that kind of like superior, let's say inner older brother archetype presence in the moment, I began like burst like crying, right? And it was like tears of like as if, how can I tell you, there's tears of falling from paradise, and then there's the tears of missing paradise when it was so close. It was like that sort of feeling. It was a feeling of an original sin, but not a religious one, and a one in accordance to the natural, as the self, how the brain is simulating itself. It's as if I would say in that moment I experienced my whole moment of being as a sort of original original sin, right? In the sense that I was seeing the inefficient, and then I saw something in my mind that was efficient, and I saw my own inefficiency, and that's where the tears suddenly, began. Something which is strange is that because people feel that they don't get to see themselves die, right? Because we're just consciousness and attention stationed on the body, right? It's as if people usually don't have an emotion or an opinion on their own non-existence, right? But it's as if you realize you have been space, and everything is the potential and possibility of space, it's as if the divine becomes everything, that deserves to be. It's like the forces of this world. It's honestly like light enters our eyes, and mythological, subconscious urges are kind of thrown out into the cosmos. It's as if like human beings are technically in the outer realms. We're like how a biological mechanism is translating or transforming light into linguistic, psychological characteristic. And when you notice these dimensions there, like, it's as if people think spirituality means like, you sat like Buddha, and it's like, yay, it's like you're spiritual. It's honestly wondering about your eyes before you're no longer piloting through this plane of existence. It's as if it's search for the unknown presence rather than an endless loop of, you can say, the known personality's desires. It's as if in Buddhism they were like, the cause of suffering is desire, like. But the hilarious thing is, the intent to want to get enlightened is a desire. To be free from desire is a desire. And in other words, it means that the self, like I would say, traditional spirituality is how a truth seeker ran after the truth, and before accessing the truth seeker dissolved. It's like before the questioner got an answer, the questioner dissolved. It's like before the answer. I would say the ring of the absent heaven and the four quadrants to consciousness. Either consciousness is being space, which is another way of saying human beings cannot fathom emptiness because they are being it. I don't know who it was, but someone evidently in history had said that God doesn't know it's being God. Even though Abrahamically that's inaccurate, but you know what I'm saying? It's as if it's like we cannot see our totality and totality cannot see beyond itself, perhaps. So I will say this. Perhaps a good strategy is to find a logical argument for why kindness and patience. And when I say patience, that means that it's okay to have expectations, but not to have possessive expectations. You know. How much tolerance does common sense have for for the uncommon beyond its answer? Truth is like an artwork being drawn by the known and not known, guys. If a person considers that, okay, we want to build an advanced civilization, every conscious creature is welcome to assist the human species. The human idea is the captain of the advanced civilization. And so, perhaps if we can shift people's philosophy on what it is to be a human being, we may be capable to get everybody on the planet to at least consider what else could there be. When people get to that what else point, they realize that on some level, creativity relies on how the outer realms move and how your inner realms move. Questions are open systems, answers are closed systems. If a person really has an honest question, that means whoever you are listening, let's say this is like an exercise, something you can do, or anyone listening to this you can do. The person wonders about what they don't know. And what's cooler than that is what the species doesn't know. And what's even more cooler than that is in some sense what the inconceivable is. It's like the mind is being nothing and the body's being everything, and it's like to be a conscious mind is to be nothing in everything, right? And then to in some sense be just the body, it's like everything and nothing, right? Imagine like somebody's a nihilist and they ask him, hey man, what do you believe? And the person says it's nothing, you know. And then the person says, no, you can tell me, like, what do you believe? And the person says, nothing, man, nothing, you know. And the person says, no, please tell me. And then the nihilist says, nothing, bro, nothing, I believe in nothing. Nihilists are like, you know, the true comedians. It's as if what is the best type of comedy? You know, the one where it's existential joke, you know. The person's like, I've been trying to build an advanced civilization, right? But it's all empty. Okay guys, so a next level quote. Somebody wrote a very interesting comment. I studied the books of many religions for 20 years, looking for the secret to enlightenment. What I found amounts to this: if you die while you're still alive, you will not die when you are dead. Right, but what are you dying into?
Like I agree with that statement. That's traditional spirituality, like, you know, with a giant check mark, right? You know. But I would say I have wondered about this actually, and I have wondered about who am I? Like the same. I've wondered about the same thing. Like those people wanted to die before they die, right? Or it's as if like it would be. It's another way of saying it's like your inner realms stop possessing your outer realms, and when you notice the simultaneity of how in the moment consciousness is at the same time being an object and subject, then the person realizes whatever they are is being observed. Another way we can say this is to die before you die is like detachment. Okay? It's as if you detach from the temporary. You know, as if you're a pilot in a temporary plane of existence, and you're like, okay, this airplane seems to be crashing. I'm gonna eject now into being the space where it all happens. Right? Sure. I mean, for me, I would say if somebody was like Mr. Within, what's a true, like, what would be a true aftermath of enlightenment, you know? I would honestly say is that your sense of self doesn't bother you, right? It becomes as natural as, like, you know, the wind moving the leaves. You see, it's like honor is a way that life can acknowledge itself before it leaves, right? When I look at the body, it's as if like I'm like, wow, all these cells, all these, you know, points in the space, existential points in the space-time continuum that are going to be released, right? That means imagine consciousness is the general, okay? Imagine subjects are the commander and objects are the soldiers, okay? And it's as if consciousness, you know, realizing that it's as if the objects, their purpose is to just go forth. The purpose of, like, in some sense, this is why hope has a sort of divine position, right? It's as if go forth. It doesn't matter what world, what manifestation, what simulation of reality, or, you know, presence of truth, you know, yeah. Like, it's as if regardless of where you find yourself, imagine you were teleported into a random civilization with a completely different universal setting, right? As if it wasn't, like, you know, inspired, the golden ratio wasn't there, it wasn't the Fibonacci sequence, it was, let's say, I don't know, you know, instead of Fibonacci, the Ibonacci, I would say. The Ibonacci sequence, you know, spelled with an E instead of an F. The idea is that once we become content with how the moment resets, once we realize that, or let's say once we attain freedom, right? Let's say whoever you are, you've attained some sort of freedom. Those who don't have freedom take. Those who have freedom give. Those who are kind, truly, unconditionally, they are free behind their eyes. It's as if they have those are signs of, like, somebody who they have died before they die, right? It's as if the inner realms have been recalibrated, and one realizes that what they're actually being is being itself. It's the nature of being, guys. It's as if being cannot die, you know? It's as if existence cannot die, right? But experience can move, fluctuate. There's a quote from this Indian polymath by the name of Rabindranath Tagore. He says, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." It's as if in the honor, I would say in the authority of a better future, the past and present have to, in some sense, listen, right? It's as if we've reached a point on this planet where the sooner the species develops and builds global networks of communication, if everybody on the planet starts like their own, let's say, small groups of people just gathering around and being like, "Hey everybody, what's going on?" It's like it's like what does it mean to be an advanced communicator, and why should there even be an advanced civilization? Honestly, when we reach that point in history where everybody's talking about the advanced civilization, it's gonna happen. I'm telling you guys. I'm such an early bird. It's strange. It's as if I sometimes think about, okay, if I reincarnate in the future, how would I remember myself in this lifetime? And I would say, the privilege of being in the room before the room anything happens. We have to be kind, because people may not be kind to themselves, and our lack of kindness may in some sense add to their unkindness, right? These are signs. This is like whenever a person is cruel to themselves, like for example, there's like suicide rates and whatnot, like that's the most ultimate cruelty to self. And so it's as if the person had to just wonder, what would a world look like where the self was honored in its position, where the others were honored and the world was honored. So in some sense, it's as if self-species future, the future world. It's as if the day where we realize that the guardians of the present are our future selves. I have this very strange theory, guys, that right now in the future not only just exists, but the future has managed to become unified beyond time. So imagine the future of the human species as a timeless collective being. Okay? Now that timeless collective being, by the nature of being timeless in the future can go anywhere in time. Right? Some people, call certain people in history prophets. I call them time travelers, but they are time traveling from a future that is an inconceivable source. It's like first there was nothing, then there was something, then something became everything, and everything realized that it's nothing. And then eventually it comes to a point where the person, just like a warrior putting down his sword and shield after a battle, right? The person puts down duality. And then there's a sort of non-dual
waiting, watching the moment vibe. I don't know how to say it. Because technically, in a spiritual universe, everybody's having a spiritual experience, right? It's based on the conditions, the context. You know, I'm just that person who's like, okay, all you can eat buffet of stories the human being can tell himself, right, on this planet. And so based on like what story is like the greatest story of them all, right? And that's where I extract purpose. You know, that means when I feel who I was in the past doesn't deserve something, when I think about who I am now, whether it deserves something or not, I realize the future can deserve something, at least. Like that's something, you know. The person's like, oh my god, there's hope, I still have a future, you know. You know, as long as we have the future, you know, it's like, you know, who knows if we have failed or succeeded, right? The future is another way of saying when man goes forth in the void, he becomes in some sense involved in his destiny. Pretty much consciousness is like a program that was first identifying with the genetics, and then it found a way to update itself. Consciousness is like a very strange update, as if what were the circumstances that made a creature become a subject. Like it wasn't just the, you know, evolutionary animals stood up and everybody was clapping in history for it. No. It's like not only did this evolutionary animal stand up, it named itself, it put on clothing, and it got on like a giant metal capsule and went to work, you know, on the subway. Like that shit is like so, you know, like beyond animal behavior, where even the animals are like, yeah, you guys are something more than animals. If squirrels and birds could talk, would be like, okay, you aliens do whatever you like, just leave us out. We are honestly like acting like aliens to lesser species. You're like pet owners, like, you know, like your pet psychology is infused with the same shock if in the future aliens land on Earth, right? You know. Imagine a person's trying to start small talk with an alien, an extraterrestrial alien species that landed on Earth in the future, and they're like, yeah, you know, it's like we realize you're superior beings, right? And so, you know, we're also superior beings. We take care of animals and whatever, you know, we take care of ourselves, right? And imagine the alien species says, so, you human beings, do you know what you are? Right? That would be a smart question. That's how we would know. It's like, you know, an extraterrestrial friendship is possible, you know, in this hypothetical example. And imagine the human species, like the leaders, like I'm even wondering if I was there and the alien, like an alien species was like, hey, human beings, do you know, like, do you guys know what you are? We'd be like, it would be so embarrassing. It'd be like, no, man, but we're acting like we do. Oh, man. Let me tell you guys, really what life is, at least so far, you know, and consider me as a fool or consider me as wise or whatever. Like, I honestly don't care if you're realistic as for ends. Like, a person can be branded as good in one day and then branded as bad as another day, and then at some point they're like, okay, it's like good and evil are like a machine, right? Like a looping machine. You know. But beyond duality, what a person finds is embracing, and I shouldn't say embracing, it's like you stop being a noun and a verb, and you realize that from the beginning of your life, what life force is that it's like the force has been present, the life has been changing, right? It's as if, or I'll say it in this way, it's like we're a life form, the form has been changing, but the light, the life is kind of like how awareness on some primary level is like never ending, right? Like the way the heart is behaving, it's as if it's behaving like endlessly, right? That means sometimes when I think if our organs had self-consciousness, how strange, how bizarre, like the body may not even be able to function, right? It's that all these unconscious organs are being consciously conducted by, where the free will is happening. Pretty much, I think the proper approach of like really how civilization advances is that first everybody acknowledges the physics, right? And then we wonder what comes after the physics, which the word meta means after. So it's as if we see our limitations, we wonder if we can surpass them. And all that teachers in the educational system have to do is that instead of teaching, just introduce students to, I would say, universal questions the species is trying to solve. Right? There can be an incredible honor system in the educational system. I'm not saying like samurai level of honor, but there would be this point where, first of all, I think in the future, children are going to get paid. Like that's the logical thing. It's like politicians were like, how do we keep the kids off from the streets and back into the schools? It's like very easy. It's like pay them, or give them some sort of points which can be captured, right? So let's say a kid's grades in school like leads to points, and then those points lead to like, I don't know, their university being costing less or something. I'm saying it I'm saying it in the sense that like even on a daily way, imagine there's a kid who has nothing to eat and the kid comes to school and hands him an assignment, right? Which let's say that assignment had cost a lot, right? And then in some sense it's like, imagine the teacher's like, all right, you spent all this time and just one person out of 8 billion just wrote a letter on your piece of paper, and it's as if like the person was satisfied, right? There's so many ways the world can move. This is the really freedom of mind. Freedom of mind means that it's okay to let the mind change, to watch it change. Like right now I could say this is my body, and then somebody would say who is the mind? And I could say, okay, the mind is the mind, but then somebody could say this is my mind, and then somebody could say, okay, who's that mind that owns the mind, right? And then somebody could say my soul, right? And somebody says whose soul, right? And eventually it just reaches this unknown point that goes beyond the language threshold. So when you as a conceptual entity notice the limits of duality and notice the language threshold, beyond that language threshold, this is a bit strange to say, but true mysticism is dehumanized. And what that means is that there is a huge chance that we are just a phase of nature, and the human archetype cannot properly associate to the geometry of truth. Expectations is character in a story. It is the desire of a character in a story. I would say if a person, let's say, is trying to be kind, and they try to be kind in a way where they're not a character in a story, they would have no emotions, right? That means emotions are technically desires for probabilities of the future that occur in our mind, that are present in our mind, right? The soul yearns for its hidden beauty, and that hidden beauty is beyond object and subject. can you imagine like a person being like, wait a minute, is just like my name is Amin, Amin, and it's like me thinking like it are just my letters like owning my personality. Have I become like, you know what it is in the future? There's gonna be like a cyber life, let's say a biological life, a mental, psychological life, and there's going to be a linguistic life. Our names are like how we exist in a language-oriented universe. I think that the most capable and most powerful and most able and most advanced beings on this planet, they will realize universal kindness is the ultimate approach. And universal kindness means allowing life to advance without intervention. When I say without intervention, I shouldn't say without intervention, but it's like what is the value of kindness? You help accelerate the journey of another soul. And imagine you wondered about not just your own spirit, but you wondered about the spirit that moves behind the eyes of the species. And you wonder about the spirit that in some sense is the universe manifesting itself as one. In Vedic thought, they talk about truth, and they use this very interesting way of talking. Like what they say is that truth is self-effulgent. Self-effulgent. It's self-illuminous, self-luminous. That means truth is not dependent on anything, but man in his association with the illusion, then it becomes dependent on truth. Truth is like a radio channel that if you don't go on that radio channel, it's as if like you don't hear like music, you know what I mean? Sometimes when I hear like the New Age community saying like, yo man, it's all about oneness, I feel like it's like we were being for like 4.5 million years just oneness, right? Like we were being oneness from the beginning. It's the duality is new and an awareness beyond the duality. So I would say either the infinite dimension or sort of return to a novel singular dimension. Pretty much every object and subject can be seen as either being infinite, being dual, being singular, and being void. These are the 4 dimensions of Islam. When I wonder about if consciousness was just synonymous with space, as if like imagine consciousness was how space was being alive. And the body was just found in that space, or present in that space. It's honestly just caring for the eyes of the human species. This is the kindness I have discovered, that in some sense a win-win scenario is possible on Earth. Anyways, guys, I guess I'll say one last sentence. Regardless how light becomes psychology, and then the psychology storifies itself and becomes a character in a story, which the concept of sacrifice can apply. Pretty much, it's as if like culture is destined towards the perspective of an eternal being's behavior. You see, it's as if that's what freedom is. Nothing can be lost. The future is like, the sky cracking, and in some sense another, realm being found. Can you imagine, like, the day the sky cracked? Like, I'm sure this is, like, probably in some religious texts. I don't know. If we are dishonest, we can't be kind. If we are ignorant, we cannot be kind. If we are careless, we are unconsciously being unkind. And to cultivate kindness in all dimensions of life is to wonder how the more advanced being in the moment will behave. It's as if true power doesn't need to destroy. Like, the sign of a truly powerful being is how much power they bring to their world rather than how much power they take from it. It's as if, do we want to see the greatest human species, the greatest effort of the human species the cosmos has ever seen, history has ever seen, or shall we just live in the inefficiency of a civilization that hasn't cared to update itself in accordance to what is, in accordance to how we're truly being a psychological entity? An advanced civilization will care for not just the bodies of the members of civilization. An advanced civilization would care for their minds. An advanced civilization will, in some sense, not make financial circumstances, pretty much an advanced civilization is when technology automates a lot of labor and human beings are rendered as, how can I tell you? It's as if, you are, it's like the artist is the soul of how the paint moves on the canvas. How the paint of the mind moves on the canvas of the body. Our expectations, if they are dishonest, if our expectations are dishonest or unnatural, it's like the intent behind the expectation is a feeling of how things should be. It's kind of hilarious. It's like, probably this is not an accurate way to say it, but it seems like emotions are the thoughts of our thoughts. Anyways, guys. Thanks for listening. And get to see the power of patience. I'm learning from this in every moment of my life. That patience is as if more levels, more dimensions are accessed, and then free will can decide. Or the lion can choose to roar or leap. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening.